The straight razor gleamed under the desk lamp. Judge Morrison's hands trembled as he stared at it, then at the man sitting across from him. Bumpy Johnson hadn't said a word in 3 minutes. He didn't need to. The message was clear. 20 years for my brother, or 20 seconds for you. The gavel came down like a gunshot. Crack, double quotes, 20 years, hard labor. Attica State Prison. Judge Harold Morrison's voice cut through the Manhattan courthouse with surgical precision. Willie Johnson's. Legs buckled. 2 bailiffs grabbed him before he hit the floor, their hands digging into his arms like steel vices, while everyone else gasped and whispered. One man in the back row didn't move. Bumpy Johnson sat perfectly still, his face a mask of stone. But his eyes, those eyes, told a different story. They promised something dark, something patient, something inevitable. Judge Morrison noticed. For a split second, their gazes locked, and the judge felt a chill run down his spine. But pride is a powerful drug. Morrison smirked slightly, as if to say, "What are you going to do about it?" "Remove the prisoner," Morrison ordered. That's when Willie started screaming. "Bumpy! Bumpy! Don't let them do this." The bailiffs dragged him toward the side door. Willie's voice cracked with terror, with the knowledge of what 20 years in Attica really meant. Men went in as men and came out as ghosts. The courtroom deputy's hand moved to his gun knot because Willie was resisting. But because Bumpy Johnson had stood up, the room went silent. Bumpy rose slowly, buttoning his charcoal gray suit jacket with deliberate movements. He didn't rush, didn't shout, didn't threaten. He simply looked at Judge Morrison with a gaze that needed no words. It was a promise, etched in silence. Then he turned and walked out, outside. Bumpy's crew lined the street-black Cadillacs, Lincoln's faces hard as concrete. They knew what that look meant. War was coming. "Boss, just say the word." Freddie Williams stepped forward. "We can hit his house tonight, no?" Bumpy's voice was quiet but absolute. He lit a cigarette and exhaled slowly. "Not yet. Let me think." The crew exchanged knowing glances. When Bumpy said, "Let me think," someone was about to learn a lesson they'd never forget. The response wouldn't be hot-headed. It would be surgical. Bumpy climbed into his Cadillac and looked back at the courthouse one last time. 20 years, he whispered. "We'll see about that." Harlem held its breath in the bars, barbershops, and after-hours clubs. Everyone asked the same question. What would Bumpy do? See, Bumpy Johnson wasn't just a name in 1952 Harlem. He was an institution. The man who kept order when police couldn't. The man who made sure elderly women walked safely to church. The man who lived by one sacred rule. Family is everything. Those who knew Bumpy's story understood why. 40 years earlier in Charleston, South Carolina, 2 brothers survived poverty that would have killed weaker souls. Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson and Little Willie had nothing but each other. No mother, no father, just brotherhood. Bumpy remembered the defining moment. He was 10, Willie was 7. 3 older boys cornered them, demanding Bumpy's shoeshine money. When Bumpy refused, the beating came. But as the biggest kid raised a brick over Bumpy's head, Willie threw himself on top of his brother. The brick came down on Willie's back instead. Willie took that beating without crying, without breaking. When it was over, Bumpy cradled his brother and made a vow. "Nobody touches my brother, ever." Now in his apartment above the Cotton Club, Bumpy stared at Willie's photograph while his crew threw out ideas. "We could kidnap the judge's daughter," Marcus suggested. "No." Bumpy's voice froze the room. "I don't touch kids. I don't threaten women, but judges. Judges bleed just like everyone else. So what's the play?" Freddie asked. Bumpy walked to the window overlooking Harlem. The play is making Judge Morrison understand that keeping Willie locked up is more dangerous than letting him go. I need him to reverse his own decision of his own free will. The crew looked confused. How? Bumpy smiled. First, we learn everything about Judge Harold Morrison. Every man has secrets. We find his. By Tuesday morning, Bumpy's investigators had delivered. Freddie laid 3 photographs on Bumpy's desk. Monday night. Morrison left the courthouse, told his driver to take him home, then got out at Canal Street. The first photo showed Morrison checking over his shoulder in an alley. He walked 4 blocks, then went in here. The second showed a door with Chinese characters above it. Gambling den? Bumpy asked. High-stakes poker. The kind where men lose houses in a single night. The third photograph showed Morrison at a table, his chips gone. He's into the house for $15,000. Bumpy whistled. That was serious. Money in 1952. Who runs it? Tommy Lee. You remember the protection dispute we settled? Tommy owes you a favor. Bumpy leaned back. The pieces were connecting. So Morrison owes $15,000 to a man who owes me. There's more. Over the next hour, Bumpy learned everything. Gambling debts, a mistress in Brooklyn, loan sharks circling. Morrison's perfect reputation was a facade hiding a desperate man. The most valuable information came last. Every Thursday night, Morrison stays late in his chambers, works until 11. His clerk leaves at 7. Security changes shift at 9:45. For 12 minutes, the third floor is empty, except for Morrison. Bumpy opened his desk drawer and pulled out something wrapped in velvet. A straight razor, old, perfectly maintained ivory and gold handle. The blade caught the light like liquid silver. This belonged to my grandfather, Bumpy said quietly. He was a freed slave who became a barber. Used to say this razor could cut through anything. Lies, pride, fear, he told me. Justice cuts both ways, boy. When do we move? Thursday night, alone. No guns, no crew. What I need to do by myself. Wednesday passed in preparation. Bumpy didn't sleep, playing the conversation in his head, anticipating every response. This wasn't about violence. This was about psychology. Thursday evening, Bumpy dressed in a simple black suit and slipped the razor into his pocket. At 9:30, he left for the courthouse. The streets parted as he passed. Nobody spoke. They just watched their protector walk toward. Justice. 9:47 p.m. The courthouse back entrance stood in shadow. Old Mr. Chen, the janitor Bumpy had helped years ago, handed him a key with shaking hands. Third floor. Judge Morrison in chambers. 10 minutes only. Bumpy slipped inside and climbed the marble stairs. Each step echoed in the empty building. First floor, dark courtrooms. Second floor, filing cabinets full of broken dreams. Third floor, just as he walked past portraits of previous judges, their stern faces watching from the walls. How many had been corrupt? Sold justice while convincing themselves they were righteous. Judge Morrison's door. Light glowed. Beneath it, Bumpy thought of Willie. Of that brick coming down on his little brother's back. Of the promise he'd made. He opened the door. Morrison looked up from his paperwork. Confusion turning to recognition, turning to fear. His hand reached for the phone. I wouldn't, Bumpy said softly, closing the door with a click that sounded like a gunshot. Morrison froze. Bumpy pulled out the straight razor. The judge's face went white. Bumpy walked forward and gently placed the razor on the desk between them. Then he sat down. 5 seconds passed. 10, 15, neither man spoke. Only the clock ticking and Morrison's ragged breathing filled the silence. Finally, Bumpy spoke. You sent my brother away for 20 years. The jury found him guilty. I was doing my job, your job. Bumpy leaned back. When you go home tonight, what will you do? Pour scotch, kiss your wife, sleep in your comfortable bed. Meanwhile, my brother is in a 6-bite cell. Do you know what they do to men in Attica, Judge? There are procedures. Appeals. I didn't come here to talk about appeals. Morrison's eyes darted to the razor, then back to Bumpy's face. You got a brother, Judge Morrison. What? Simple question. 2 sisters, Morrison whispered. Then you understand, family. That bond. That loyalty. Bumpy leaned forward. You think that robe makes you better than the people you sentence. But when someone threatens what you love, you do exactly what I'm doing right now. Mr. Johnson, I know about your gambling problem. $15,000 to Tommy Lee's establishment. I know about the loan sharks. The mistress in Brooklyn. Everything. Morrison's hands trembled. Those Chinese gentlemen you owe. They work for me now. As of yesterday, I bought your debt. All of it. Morrison's face turned gray. Your career, your marriage, your reputation, it all sits on a razor's edge. And I'm the only thing standing between you and the fall. Bumpy stood, leaving the razor on the desk. But I'm not cruel. I'm just a brother who loves his brother. And you're smart enough to understand what needs to happen next. I can't. Just the law doesn't. The law is whatever you make it. You reverse decisions all the time. Procedural errors, new evidence. I'm sure you can find a reason to review my brother's case. Bumpy walked to the door, then paused. That razor stays with you. A reminder. Every time you see it, remember this conversation. Remember what happens when powerful men forget that justice cuts both ways. He smiled without warmth. You're smart. Judge, I trust you'll figure this out. Then Bumpy walked out, leaving Morrison alone with his fear and a gleaming razor. Monday morning, 9 a.m. The courtroom packed with confusion. Judge Morrison had called an emergency hearing on Willie Johnson's case with no explanation. In the back row sat Bumpy Johnson. Same suit, same stillness. But his eyes held certainty. At 9:15, Morrison entered. He looked like he'd aged 10 years. Face drawn, eyes sunken, hands trembling. Please be seated, he said hoarsely. The silence was absolute. I have called this hearing to address significant irregularities regarding the People versus William Johnson. The prosecutor shot to his feet. Your Honor, the trial was concluded. There are proper channels. Sit down, Mr. Stanton. The command was final. Stanton sat, face red. Morrison began listing procedural errors. Improper jury instructions. Questionable evidence. Potential witness coercion. One by one, he dismantled his own trial with surgical precision and desperate purpose. Furthermore, the sentence imposed was disproportionate given the circumstances. Therefore, the conviction is set aside. The defendant is released immediately with time served and 2 years probation. The courtroom erupted. Stanton shouted about misconduct. The defense attorney cried. Spectators were on their feet. Through it all, Morrison's eyes found the back row. Bumpy gave the slightest nod. Acknowledgement. Within the hour, Willie walked. Out of the courthouse, he saw Bumpy on the steps and ran. The brothers collided in an embrace decades in the making. I knew you'd come, Willie whispered. Nobody touches my brother, Bumpy replied, ever. Inside, Morrison's colleagues confronted him. Harold, this will destroy your reputation. Morrison laughed bitterly. My reputation is the least of my concerns. He thought of the razor locked in his drawer, of the gambling debt mysteriously forgiven with a note, courtesy of Mr. Johnson. Don't make me regret this generosity. I'm requesting transfer to civil court, Morrison announced, effective immediately. His colleagues stared in shock. 3 months later, the courthouse janitor found the razor in Morrison's trash and returned it to Bumpy with a note. "You were right. Justice cuts both ways." The story spread through Harlem like wildfire. Within 48 hours, every barbershop and street corner buzzed with the tale. The details varied, but those close to Bumpy knew the truth. He'd simply made Morrison understand that keeping Willie locked up was more dangerous than setting him free. The ripple effects were immediate. Other judges suddenly found procedural irregularities in cases involving Bumpy's organization. Nobody made threats, but the message was clear. Bumpy never confirmed what happened that Thursday night. When asked, he'd simply smile and change the subject. Willie understood the gift his brother gave him. He stayed close to Bumpy, became a trusted lieutenant, and never forgot he owed his freedom to his brother's courage. Judge Morrison moved to Connecticut. Years later, his daughter asked why they left New York so suddenly. "Sometimes you learn the world works differently than you thought," Morrison told her. "Sometimes you meet men who remind you that power has many forms, and the law is just one." Of them, she noticed her father kept a beautiful antique razor locked in a drawer, but never touched it. The razor became legend. A private collector supposedly acquired it years later, showing it only to those who understood its significance. Willie lived another 30 years, dying peacefully in 1982 with Bumpy at his bedside. At the funeral, old men told stories about the Johnson brothers, about loyalty and family, and they told the story of the judge and the razor dot of the man who walked into chambers with nothing but a blade and his reputation, and walked out with his brother's freedom as they lowered Willie's casket. Someone whispered the words that followed Bumpy for decades. "That's the man who made a judge blink." Bumpy placed a white rose on the casket. "Nobody touches my brother," he whispered one last time. "I kept my promise, Willie." In Harlem, the law had a gavel. But Bumpy Johnson had something sharper. He had loyalty, patience, understanding that real power isn't about force, it's about knowing what people fear, what they'll sacrifice to protect. Judge Morrison learned that lesson the hard way. He learned that justice cuts both ways, that the powerful aren't invincible, that sometimes the man in the back of your courtroom holds more real power than all your legal authority. The legend of the straight razor wasn't just about one night or one reversed sentence. It was about what happens when a man loves his brother more than he fears consequences. It was about the moment Morrison realized his robe meant nothing against a man who had burned down the world to protect his family. 20 years became time served. A gavel's crack became a whisper of surrender, and a straight razor became the symbol of a truth Harlem never forgot. The men who change the world aren't the ones with the most power. They're the ones with the most to protect.